Okay, hello friends. I haven't seen you in a while. I wasn't sure... Oh, there's my cat. Sorry, okay. I wasn't sure if you would still be interested in my best books of the year video because it is already March, but I reached out to my subscribers via the community tab and a lot of you still wanted to see this video. So here we are. Those are them. When it comes to my reading year last year, it wasn't great. I was in a reading slump for a few months. I ended up reading 54 books, I believe. And let's just get it out of the way. This list is not very long because I didn't find many favorites last year, but it is full of classics, which is like in and of itself is not a bad thing. Like I love reading classics, I do, but I also read a lot of other genres, whether it's horror, literary fiction, contemporary fiction in general. And I think it's a bit of a shame that this list does not reflect that. So even though I do read other books, I just didn't find many favorites in those genres. So, but I still feel like a lot of you would be, what's my cat doing? But I don't think most of you mind that this book is going to be classics heavy. It's mostly modern classics. I really got into 20th century classics last year, which is why I think I had a better reading year kind of classics wise in 2024 compared to 2023, because in 2023 I barely had any favorites when it comes to classics, so it's like a 180 from last year. And what I did was I stopped pushing myself to read things that I felt like I needed to read, which were like 19th century classics or like just Victorian classics in general. So when I let that notion go that I should focus on the 19th century classics, and I actually started picking classics that I was interested in and not classics that I felt like I needed to read, I feel like that's when it flipped and I started enjoying a lot of classics. That's how I found quite a few favorites. So, actually there's another cat there. I forgot about that chair. Anyway, I have one honorable mention, but it's a very important book to me and I really wish more people would read it. It's such an underrated gem, and that is Despised and Rejected by Rose Allatini. Not sure how you pronounce that. I think she's actually half Polish, that's interesting. This book has less than 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. This is crazy. So, this book is set mostly around the First World War, but it's not a war novel necessarily. This is described as a gay pacifist novel. How can you not be interested in that? We have two main characters, Daniel Blackwood, who is a young composer, and Antoinette, who is a young woman of French descent. And in the beginning of the novel, they meet and I'm just gonna say it, Daniel is gay and he meets Antoinette, who is also interested in women but doesn't fully realize that. And upon their meeting, Daniel assumes that she knows that he's gay and, you know, offers kind of a companionship, but she doesn't really understand what he's trying to say, but she pretends he does. So we have this kind of misunderstanding at the beginning of the novel, and it goes from there. Then First World War happens, and Daniel is a conscientious objector, I think that's what it's called. It's when like you refuse to go to war, and that's very interesting. I've never seen that explored in any classic, and we meet a lot of other young people, young men who are against war and are pacifists. The author was just so ahead of her time. Like, this book is about pacifism and homosexuality during the First World War, so I do understand why this book was banned and the remaining copies were burned. But I am also so glad that Persephone Classics decided to republish it. This is such a well-written novel with such well fleshed out characters. That being said, it might sound like this was a 5-star for me. It was not. This is just an honorable mention because while I did really love the first half, the second half was a bit less engaging and I did have some problems with it. I didn't love the direction that this book took when it comes to the female main character. It almost felt like it was undermining her sexuality. I don't want to get into details and like sexuality can be fluid and it's not always black and white, and also you have to take into consideration the time period that this was written. But I just didn't love the direction that this book went when it comes to the female character. Also, there was this one scene at a, what is it called, like a masked ball, where, you know, people put on costumes. You know where this is going. A classic with a mask ball. That's not gonna end well. That's going to have some very not sensitive takes. So yeah, during the basketball scene, there were some like xenophobic / racist comments that I did not appreciate. But I don't think aside from that scene there was anything else there. I've read classics that were much worse than this when it comes to the like xenophobia specifically. But yeah, even if I had like little quibbles with this book, for a novel that was published in I think 1917, the themes that it explores and how good the writing is, considering that, I would absolutely recommend it. Also, it was like quite funny at times too. Yeah, like I said, truly an underrated gem. That was the only honorable mention on the list. Then we have one of the very few literary / contemporary fiction books on this list, The Ensemble by Gabel. This book is about 4 classical musicians who play in a string quartet. We have 2 violin players, 1 viola player, and a cellist. Yes, so we have 4 perspectives. We start off when they're still in the conservatory in their early 20s and kind of see them take their kind of first steps as a string quartet, and we finish off when they're in their 40s. It's about how throughout those decades they're trying to keep this friendship and stay together, and how as time passes they continuously arrange their lives around music. And it's really beautiful. It's very slow paced. It's definitely a character driven novel. Each part actually had a list of pieces. Can you see it? Here. It's a list of pieces that they play in that specific part. So it was fun to listen to those pieces while the characters were talking about them or playing them. I have to say, this book is a little bit pretentious, but it's my kind of pretentious, okay? I personally did play piano for a few years. I didn't really go to a music school. I mean, it kind of was a music school, but not really. I just had piano lessons twice a week and like theory lessons once a week for a few years. So yeah, this just felt kind of nostalgic. The reason why this book is last, there is a plot line where one of the characters is adopting a child from Ethiopia, and I personally don't think it was handled super well. It wasn't necessarily racist, but it was giving I don't see race. So that was a bit off-putting. I wish we explored at least a little bit the child's racial identity instead of completely ignoring it. Like it wasn't mentioned at all. I don't know. I might be a bit nitpicky because I haven't seen anyone in the reviews talking about that issue, so take it as you will. But because of that, I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. I'm not sure if I would widely recommend this book because there is quite a lot of talk about classical music. Actually, the author was a cellist for a few years. So I'm just not sure if people would enjoy it as much as me if they don't have any interest at all in classical music. In a way, it did remind me of Lola Quartet by Emily St. John Mandel, but I did enjoy it more than Lola Quartet. This is what I wanted that book to be. Yeah, I don't know if I convinced you to read it, but there's that. Then we have Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. I read this in my latest vlog, which I put out quite a long time ago. If you haven't watched it, you should. It's the vlog where I read books, and like the vlog finishes when I cry while reading the book, so like I'm just reading a lot of sad books. And that was the first book that I read in that vlog, and this almost made me cry. This book was a big surprise to me, I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't expecting much from a science fiction novel written in the 60s by a white man. Call me prejudiced, but I'm just being honest. But Daniel Keyes did surprise me. So when it comes to the synopsis, we have Charlie Garden, who is an intellectually disabled 32-year-old who works at a bakery, and in the evenings he attends classes where he is being taught to read, and a teacher who teaches those classes, recommends him for an operation that would increase his intelligence. Because Charlie is very eager to learn, so that's why the teacher recommended him. This is the science fiction part, right? This operation is kind of an experiment. It hasn't really been done before except for being tested on a mouse, Algernon. So Charlie is instructed to kind of keep a journal. Each entry is called progress, yes, progress report. And we can see how Charlie's intelligence slowly increases through those progress reports because he spells better, he structures the sentence in a better way. Later his thought processes change. So the surgery is a success, or is it? If you haven't read it, you can find out yourself. I was surprised how emotionally mature and heart-wrenching this book was for a science fiction novel. It does use some language of its time. The R word is used multiple times, but I think it still showed a very compassionate approach towards people with mental disabilities. The author actually did have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and he also used to be an English teacher who taught children with mental disabilities, so I'm sure that helped with writing this book. I did give it 4.5 stars because of the slight sexism. Nothing horrible, I didn't love how some of the female characters were written, or more like what kind of purpose they served in the story, if that makes sense. But overall, it was quite a thought-provoking read, kind of focusing on the psychological and philosophical aspects of this kind of experiment. It explored questions like what it means to be human, what it means to be a person, what is our purpose in life. It talked about childhood trauma, but also love and loneliness. I have to say, the last line almost broke me. Yeah, I had to stare off in the distance for like 10 minutes. So yes, this was an unexpected favorite. What's next? Oh, we have a book that I do not have physically, and I don't want to lie to you, but technically, from here on out, we have books that are 5 stars, and I will be less negative and have less problems with those. Just in case we're concerned why I still mention the negative things in my best books of the year video. Next we have a book that I listened to on audiobook, 5 Little Pigs by Agatha Christie. This makes me very happy because I have been searching for another 5-star from Agatha Christie for years now. Before, the only other 5-star was the first book in the Miss Marple series, which is Murder at the Vicarage, but we finally have another 5-star. When it comes to the synopsis, we have Hercule Poirot, who investigates a crime that happened 16 years ago. A woman called Caroline recently died in prison after being convicted of murdering her husband, but she wrote in a recent letter that she was not guilty, that she was innocent. So her daughter Carla asks Poirot to investigate the case, and we go from there. So as you can see, this is a cold case. It's a case from the past, and Poirot tries to solve this mystery purely based on other people's testimonies and without access to the scene of a crime. Basically, you have the same story retold from several different perspectives, which I really enjoyed because there's such a contrast between the way things were told versus the reality, because people remember things differently, or they just are trying to paint themselves in a better light, or just they made assumptions about other people that are just not true. And that just made me realize that Agatha Christie is just a master of storytelling, and she truly understands human psyche. Not much to say here, really enjoyed it, 5 stars. Hopefully there are more to come, because I still have quite a lot of Agatha Christie books to read. So next we have Quicksand by Nella Larsen. Also, can I just say, this happened to me for the first time ever. I have bought a fake Penguin Classics. You probably can't tell just by looking at it, but first of all, the feeling is quite different. It has this like rubbery almost feeling to it, and also I'm not sure if the camera will pick it up, but the name Nella Larsen is like shifted in the middle. Can you see it? Can you see it? It's like not straight. It's just like the way it's printed, it's wrong. And at the end of the book you can see printed in Poland by Amazon Fulfillment, which normally original Penguin Classics don't have anything like that. I did end up asking for a refund. Actually, that's not. I asked if I could like return it, and they were like, just keep it and we're going to send you the money. So I have it, but at least I haven't paid for it. But yes, the book. Oh, okay, so this book is technically a 4.5 star, but the more distance I have from it, the more it actually feels like a 5 star, so I will circle back to that point later. What is this book about? This book is about Helga Crane, who is biracial. She was born to a black father and a white mother, and she is a young woman who teaches at this black school in the South, but at the beginning of the novel she decides that this is not what she wants to do with her life, and she quits and moves to Harlem, and later in the book also moves somewhere else and just goes on this journey of trying to find herself. So this book definitely reminded me of Madame Bovary by Flaubert and The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton, which, like, if you know me, you know that like those are some of my favorite books ever. So this is a very high praise. They all include this like complex psychological exploration of women who try to find their identity and their purpose in life and happiness, and the main characters all have this internal conflict between their desires and what's expected of them, and go on this journey, like I said, to find personal freedom and finally feel satisfied with their life. And do they find that? But obviously Quicksand has something new to offer in this conversation, because it delves into, you know, racial identity, and it explores the experience of being biracial and struggling to find one's place in the world. Helga is always in this battle with herself, either suppressing her blackness or whiteness. She always feels like an outsider and jumps from place to place, never fully feeling at home anywhere. And Helga isn't perfect. She has her own kind of hang-ups. What? She sometimes does try to push down her blackness to fit into this high white society, but she is aware of it, and she is uncomfortable with this desire to blend with the white people, and she knows that she cannot and shouldn't ignore this part of her. But she both cannot fully accept herself, and also she never feels fully accepted by either the black people or the white people. And from what I've heard, this is very much, I don't know if it's fully autobiographical, but definitely at least in parts autobiographical. And I have to say, I will always be drawn to books focusing on female protagonists that have this deep desire to find purpose in their life and find their identity while having to face such strict societal expectations. And it's never this beautiful, easy journey, and it's very realistic, some might say tragic. Yeah, I just keep thinking about, you know, Madame Bovary, The House of Mirth, and this book. And those characters are dissatisfied with their life but refuse to give up and keep searching for something that will fulfill them and feel right. And they might be viewed as selfish, self-absorbed, or even unsympathetic. But personally, I always feel such kinship with them. And especially I feel that way when it comes to classics, because women at that time had such limited choices and they had to go against the current. So this fight to find happiness, I always find very brave and admirable. So yes, the reason, actually when I finished this book, I initially thought like this was a 4-star. Then when I sat down to review it, because I read it in some kind of vlog, I think it was the vlog when I was trying to catch up on my reading challenge, because I was a few books behind, so you can hear more of my thoughts there. Initially, I thought this was a 4-star, then the more I talked about it in the review, the more I was like, no, this feels like a 4.5 star. And now that I have sat down to film this video, I'm just like, you know what, the way I talk about it, the way I feel about it, it really feels like a 5-star. So I don't know, after having some distance from this book, after having some time to think about it, I really feel like this is a 5-star. The reason why I initially thought that this wasn't anything higher than a 4-star was because I was a bit dissatisfied with the ending. But the more I feel about it, the more I feel like it's very realistic, and like, even if this is not what I wanted for the character, I do understand why Nella Larsen ended this book this way. Like, it makes sense, it's realistic. It's disappointing, but in a, like, you're rooting for this character to like get what she wants, and you know, with the way it ends, you're kind of like, oh man. Also, I was really worried at the very end. There was this like religious turn, and I was like, I don't like this where it's going, but she didn't fully go there. I don't want to spoil it, but like, yeah, I don't know. Is it 4.5 star? Is it 5 star? Does it really matter? On Goodreads, I gave it a 5 star anyway because there are no half stars. So there's that. Then we have the top 3. The next 2 books I will talk about very briefly because there's not much to say about them actually. Next we have Simple Passion by Ernaux. This is kind of hard to explain what this book is because on Goodreads it says it's fiction, but it's not really fiction. It's definitely autobiographical. Basically, I think this was published in 1989, and in this collection we can assume Ernaux recollects an affair with a married man that lasted for 2 years, and how it just consumed her entire life during that time. Because of the subject matter, I wasn't necessarily expecting to love it, but I got sucked right in. I don't know, because this feels like actual recollections of the author. There was actually no judgment on my part, because this was such an honest and intimate portrayal of getting lost in your desires and of this all-consuming love that enters every part of your being and every part of your day. Like, this was the first time where I felt like I understood what true passion feels like. Her prose is quite simple, but also at the same time very clear and precise. Yeah, it's just such a pleasure to read. And also it's like 50 pages long, so you can absolutely and probably should read it in one sitting. I would definitely recommend it. And like, God, can this woman write? On number 2 we have a Polish book called Cukry by Dorota Kotas. I don't think I have many viewers who are Polish, so I will get through this very quickly. This book is very similar to the previous book in a is it fiction or is it autobiographical sort of way. It's written by someone who is very similar age to mine, is a lesbian, and she's on the autism spectrum. Yeah, it's kind of a memoir. I wouldn't call it fiction. She recalls stories from her childhood, living in Poland, and also adulthood, and describes them in such a vivid and entertaining way while being so vulnerable and genuine. Very well written, very sharp, funny, and relatable, especially since, you know, she's my age and she lives in Poland, and yeah, can't wait what else she comes up with. And then we have number 1, my favorite book of the year, which I did not have a chance to talk about yet, and that is Cassandra at the Wedding by Dorothy Baker. So this book focuses on Cassandra Edwards, who is a graduate student at Berkeley, and we start off this novel when she drives back to her family ranch to attend a wedding of her twin sister Judith, who is getting married to this respectable young man who is a doctor. Without getting into much details, because I do believe it's better to go into this book not knowing much. We know that the sisters haven't spoken to each other for some time. There was some discord between them, and Cassandra is not very excited to go to that wedding. I think that should be enough for the synopsis. This is I would categorize this as a tragic comedy or a dark comedy, which is my bread and butter. It technically falls under the canon of queer classics, but in my opinion, it's not a very prevalent theme in this novel. I mean, it is kind of under the surface throughout the whole novel, but it's not explicitly explored, so I just want to manage expectations here. This was published in the 60s, but it felt so modern. I really understand why this book is resurfacing now. Like, in the past 2 years, I've seen more and more of this title, and I really understand why, because it does have this feeling of this like sad girl literary fiction kind of vibes that are popular now. The writing style is so sharp. The descriptions are not overly wordy, but very vivid. This is set in California during this very hot summer, and I really could feel this oppressiveness of the heat around the characters. Okay, sorry, my camera was overheating, so I had to turn it off for a while. But I wanted to say something that's very interesting about the narrative, because while it is written in the first person, and we do experience this emotional turmoil that Cassandra goes through, she doesn't quite let the reader on her plans. So throughout the story, you truly have no idea what she's gonna do, what the plan is. There was always this tension in the air. So the more the story progressed, the more we knew about her mental state, the more kind of on edge you were about where is this going. But it's not like a thriller. Like I said, it's kind of a tragic comedy, so even the heavier topics are undercut with this wittiness and humor. And I truly don't know how to talk about Cassandra. I'm not sure if it's coming through in my review, but she really felt like one-of-a-kind character. She was so complex and full of contradictions and so unpredictable, because like, on one hand, she was very aware of other people's feelings and she tried to kind of dance around other people's feelings, not to hurt them, but other times she would be so brutally honest that she would hurt people around her, and like she knew exactly which buttons to push. So like I said, just full of contradictions, so unpredictable. But at the same time, she was so extremely observant and quick with her remarks, and her thoughts were so amusing. Like, she was both brilliant and exhausting to be around. Yeah, this book just felt like you're watching a train wreck and you just can't look away. Okay, final remarks, because my battery is about to die. The only thing that I was not fully satisfied with, because it is not an Anya's video if I didn't find something wrong with the book, was the ending. I felt like this book kind of finished quite abruptly and everything wrapped up way too quickly and conveniently. It wasn't a terrible ending by any means. I just wanted a bit more, but I still gave it 5 stars, and this is definitely the best book of the year by like a mile. So if you haven't read it yet, I would encourage you to do so. And yes, this is where I will leave you. Please tell me if I convinced you to read any of those books, and hopefully I will see you in another video at some point this year. Okay, bye!